you and Tap and Cindy and I met in Sarasota, and we sat together at one of the tables. You spoke at that event, and it was absolutely dynamite. We fell in love with
Thank
you,
you.
fell in love with Tap, just getting to know him. And so having the conversation, we were able to sit down and talk about a song and then came up with the first draft. Almost, believe it or not, when I went back to the condo we were staying at that night, I started it that night. And then we sent you the first draft, and then we've done some rewrites of that, and which is, as they say in the music business, the real right is the rewrite.
Hmm.
And that's just a truth. Are you saying what you want to say the right way? And if not, now's the time to change it, which is what we did.
Hmm.
And so we got to know you there, and I understood the value of music there, trying to get your message in song, because some people can say, I'm not really a music person, but when they hear something through music, it tends to stick. So there's a song, it's a modern day, but it's probably 10 years old, maybe even a little older than that. But the chorus just goes, your love never fails, never gives up, never runs out on me. And it just repeats, your love never fails, never gives up, never runs out on me. That's so easy to remember. And I remember when we're talking about music and the value that it has for me, one of the people that is in my life today was telling me, he was a guest on our show here, and I asked him a question very similar to this: what does music mean to you? And he goes, well, I've never been much of a music guy, but we came to an alpha course at Friendship Church, where I was the worship pastor for several years. And I was up there leading one day, and I said to him, obviously we can't all break out into song in our workplace. You just can't do that, But when you're in front of your computer and you're feeling the stress of the day, you can sing the words in your head and move your lips. Your love never fails, never gives up. And he remembers that to this day. He was just recently interviewed, and he said that has stuck with me over these years. That song.
Yeah.
That particular song. So music has a high value and a high impact if people would give it a chance. You don't have to
Yeah.
remember the whole song. Just think of the chorus, think of the bridge
Right.
of the song. They're powerful.
Yeah. One of them that was big for me was just bigger than all my problems. Have you heard that one?
I have.
Bigger than all my problems, bigger than all my fears. God is bigger than any mountain that I can or cannot see. And it goes on. And like just remembering that my God is not surprised. He's not out of control. He's not, everything that happens in my life right now is either ordained or allowed by him for his good purpose. And those are truths that we can hang on to. And those are truths that he often brings back to me in song.
And that's one of the reasons why we need, as songwriters, we need to rewrite our work after we write it, because if they are truth, we want to make sure that it's full of truth,
Right.
and full of your message. In this particular case, the message of the Flamingo Advantage, which the song we wrote was called My Flamingo Advantage. We wanted it to be the truth that you wanted to speak. One of the things that you say in there, you've already said it now, is God's not surprised by what's going on. Not only in Mark Alewine's life, not only in Katie Hornor's life,
Yeah.
but in this crazy world we live in. And we tend to get full of anxiety because maybe we're listening to the wrong source. I'm not saying we need to be uninformed, but when we're glued to the TV and to the news, you can get pretty depressed pretty quickly. But with God's help and remembering the truths that are sung in some of these songs and singing them, I think it gets us to a whole different level of our spiritual life. I firmly, firmly believe that.
Yes. And Mark, that phrase is special to me, not just for the truth that it carries, but for the person who taught me that truth. God is not surprised was a phrase that my late grandfather used all my life. And every time something would come up, he'd be like, Katie, God's not surprised. I'd come in with whatever problem it was, and Katie, God's not surprised. I'd hear him tell my dad, Jonathan, God's not surprised, and He just said it over and over and over again. And it's something that I've had the privilege of using with my clients. And now I get to hear them telling their children and their clients, God's not surprised. Somebody wrote the other day and said, this is happening. And all I could hear was Katie in my head going, God is not surprised.
He's not. And there's a certain level of comfort in that. When anxiety wants to come in, I'm an anti-anxiety person. So when anxiety tends to fill my life, that means I need to fill it with more of Jesus and more of that peace, and
Absolutely.
more of the fact that whose better hands can I be in if I'm truly allowing that? Whose better hands can I be in, and can I pass that on to other people? And that's
Yeah.
what I want to do through music. And I love your phrase. I think you also, just a little sideline story. Wasn't it your grandfather that would? I'm gonna let you try to tell the story. Like when you walked into the room and he was there, he would say,
Oh, there you are.
"That's it."
That's him.
Like he
That's
was
him.
always looking for you.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. He knew he had that special way of making you feel special just because you walked in today.
See, that's memorable.
Yeah.
That's memorable. And that's a good way to be remembered. How do we want to be remembered, right? Oh wow, that's wonderful. Well, you've already alluded to, again, this next question, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I've heard your story or stories, but I probably haven't heard all of it. But I've heard some of the ginormous mountains that you guys have had to climb, and some of the you've navigated some really tough times. Tell us about kind of how you got through it, maybe in a different way, as a couple, because
Hmm.
I know a lot of couples that might disintegrate under that kind of pressure.
Well, it was a lot of pressure. Um, I think the big thing for those that aren't familiar with our story, we essentially moved to Mexico through charity funding to work in ministry. And then through some changes in ministry, lost a lot of that support. And so we had to figure out what we were going to do to support ourselves. And we ended up in Mexico with 4 small children, no savings, no credit cards. Family members refused loans to us, just trying to figure out what we were going to do. And neither Tap nor I had a desire to come back to the States at that point. We felt like we knew God wanted us in Mexico. It was just trying to figure out why.
Mm-hmm.
What are we supposed to be seeing here? And um, with just the last $5 in the bank, really, we started working on what would become a curriculum that we could sell to the Spanish homeschool market. And we pioneered a curriculum. That was our first business. We pioneered the literature-based homeschool method in Spanish. And we just built it little by little when we could. When we had the money, we did it. If we had the money for training, we did that. If we had the money for a conference, we did that because we didn't ever know how much we would have the next time. And just kind of living hand to mouth for many years. And I think the thing that has helped us early on in our marriage, we faced a crisis where we really had to learn to communicate. And we also had to learn about love languages, which I've they're not just for relationships anymore, folks. You use them in business too. And I've now started incorporating that training. I just did a presentation this last week on using love languages and learning styles in your marketing and your delivery of your products. But learning that early on and putting it into play, where I learned that I speak love by giving gifts and speaking words of affirmation. My husband gives love by acts of service and touch. And so if I'm giving him a gift, it doesn't mean squat to him. Right. And if he's serving me, bringing me coffee, fixing something, running errands, that doesn't mean as much to me as it would if he spoke to me in praise words or brought me an unexpected gift. Right. And so learning to love each other well and learning to communicate. The other thing is, I'm very much a type a 1 on the Enneagram. He's very much a 9 on the Enneagram, very laid back. And so early in our marriage, one of the things that came up is folks said, well, Katie runs the show, right? Because from the outside, it looked like I did. And he was, I'd say, well, let's go do this today. And he'd be more than happy to come along and do that because he just loves doing whatever makes me happy. right? He's amazing. But to the outside, it looked like he had no opinion or wasn't allowed to voice them, that I always overrode everything. And I had to learn as the wife to back up and instead of just offering the plan for the day, say, what are your plans for the day? And give him time to vocalize his desires first.
Sure.
Or to bring things to him and say, I think we ought to do this. I'd love your response. And I don't need it right now. Like let's talk it through and think about it. And then let me know what you think before we move forward with this. And so just learning some of those tactical conversational elements in our relationship, I think really helped us to be more open as we were going through things. I could come to him and say, like, I don't need you to fix this. I just need to verbally process. I'm hurting right now, or I don't know what to do right now, or, this has come up and I just need to process because I don't know what I think about it yet, And so even some of those, like tipping him off about the point of the conversation before we got started, really, really helped us to be able to better navigate some of those harder things later in life. And then knowing that we had each other's back, right?
Sweet.
He will often say to me, I choose you over my family. You are the most important. I'm so grateful that I married you. And just reinforcing to one another verbally that commitment has been huge. And it was something that had to be learned. And then it was refined through those hard times.
That's absolutely beautiful. One of the phrases that Cindy and I use, and we started doing this many years ago, we've been married for 42 years now, Katie. And one of the phrases we started using probably 30 years ago, because guys always want to fix things in a conversation. We just do. We just want to fix it. Okay, what do you need help with? Okay, we're going to fix it. And Cindy, you didn't need that. You didn't need that.
Yeah.
And so we just came up with a phrase when she said, can we talk? And I say, and I still do to this day, do you just need an ear or do I need my toolbox? And it's usually just the ear.
Right.
But sometimes I have to pull out the toolbox and we have to maybe put our heads together to figure out a way to fix whatever it is. But at least we're on the same page at that particular point. And I think that really does help you overcome some of these particular mountains. And you said it very clearly when you knew that TAP chose you over everybody else, then there's a level of comfort with that allows you to do so much more in your workspace and in your workspace in your head because you know your place. Am I right in that?
Yes, and because he is making more of an effort in recent years to verbalize that because he knows how much the words mean. Speak love to me.
Right, love languages. Yep.
And the other thing that I would just mention, if you're working with a spouse, is we try to be very intentional about where we have which conversations. And so we will do offsite. We call it an offsite weekend or an offsite quarterly planning session. It doesn't have to be an overnight, right? Sometimes it is,
Right.
but we'll go away from our house and our normal environment to talk business and planning for the next quarter, just to get on the same page and talk through big decisions without little ears around. And we still have kids in our house. And we're not that way. We're also sort of in a neutral space. So it's harder to get upset with one another if we disagree or if we have to work through something like that. And, you don't want to be doing that at the kitchen table or in your bedroom because those spaces should be reserved for other things.
Right.
And just by having that practice where it's a quarterly or a monthly offsite business meeting, then that allows us just to go from day to day with just those check-ins about what's coming up and who's doing what, because we've handled sort of the big things at those offsite meetings. And it really helps the personal relationship too.
That's awesome. Cindy and I have a camper. We're glamping when we have it, but it stays out in our driveway. In the wintertime, of course, we have to winterize it and then cover it because we live in Minnesota. But throughout the summer, if we're not taking it out someplace, we will go out there to have some of our meetings. We'll open up the slide. It's a really nice space, but it's a different space.
Right.
And it's really nice. And we've taken this even. This is fabulous conversation because we've even gone over to we live near the Mall of America, just 10 miles down the road, and there's a really nice hotel with this beautiful space. We've gone there and just sat down in one of the conference-like tables out in the lobby there, and just kind of focused on what we needed to talk about to get into that different space.
Mhm.
And it just kind of makes a like a little special moment out of that. So it's just it puts a level of importance on that particular meeting as well. So it's not just like something that happens every day.
Right, right.
So yeah, awesome.
Another thing that I think has helped us in more recent years as we've had more expendable income is to find something that we both enjoy doing. You always hear about couples that fall apart when the kids are grown because that was their mutual
Commonality.
interest.
Yep.
You know, Tap and I both love old houses, old buildings. And in our area of Mexico, there is a ton of old haciendas that are either still in ruins or have been restored or in the process of being restored. And so I love the old and the history part of it. He loves the architecture even more than I do.
Wow.
And so we started like our getaways every, as often as we can do it, every other month or once a quarter, should go and visit another one of those restored haciendas or to tour the ruins of one or whatever, and just start exploring more of those in our area together, because it gives us something that's not work to talk about and enjoy together. And that's been something really fun as well.
Well, finding that commonality is really, really important. So that's cool that you guys have been able to do that, because as a pastor for so many years, I have seen so many marriages fall apart just because they don't have the kids in common anymore. And that's
Mhm.
all they had with all the sporting events and everything else. And you get together and you talk about the kids and you do these things. And now when you're no kids there, you look across at each other and what do you talk about? So that's really awesome, Katie. I appreciate you sharing that. Well, I'd love to know how people can hear more of your God stories, because this podcast really exists, Katie, to tell God stories. That's what we do. We have people from across the world. You are not in this country, and although you're pretty much straight south of us, but little ways. But we have people from across the world that are sharing God's stories like yours, and yours is, in my mind, just so powerful. And I think it's fairly gripping. I think if people got to know you even more, and I'm sure there's a certain level of surface that I've scratched, but I don't know the half of it, right? So how can people find out a little bit more about you and your God stories and your business? I'll let you fill us in.
Well, Mark, thank you for that. God has allowed us to publish several books. So those are on our site, theflamingoadvantage.com. We also sell most of them on Amazon these days. So just look up Katie Hornor, either of those places, and you can find us. We also have a podcast. We did 250 some episodes of For Your Success that is still available. And then our Flamingo Advantage podcast goes out weekly now as well. And those are a mix of interviews with other people who are using unique ideas in their marketing and doing unique things. And then some solo shows where I'm sharing more in the weeds kind of tips and things for marketing. So everything's on our website. It links over to our social and our YouTube and our podcast and our books and all of that. And, we're more than happy to share anywhere people ask us to. So,
And that's theflamingoadvantage.com.
yes, sir.
And Hornor is Hornor.
That is right.
Beautiful. What was I going to ask you? I can't remember what I was going to ask you there. I was going to ask you about something else, but well, if you want to get a hold of Katie, you know how to do that now. Those will be in the show notes. Those links will be in the show notes there. And Katie, I cannot thank you enough for joining us today on Grit and Glory Songs and Stories. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.